It's hard to believe that I've gone all these years and built up an unnecessarily large home lab without ever dipping my toes into the Synology ecosystem. Well, boys and girls, that changes today. Well, it changed like a week ago. Synology sent over one of their rack mountable NAS units for me to try, and not only is it a solid NAS, but it's also a media center, Docker server, surveillance system, and VPN. To be clear, they sent this over knowing that they'd have no say in the video, so everything you hear is straight from my own dome. This here is the Rackstation RS822 Plus, a 1U flavored unit that may or may not be a more convenient form factor depending on your setup. I honestly didn't know that Synology made rack mountable units until about a month or so ago when I was doing some research. I'm not going to spend too much time on the hardware itself because this video is going to be about my experience using a Synology device, which is about 90% software and 10% hardware. So this device here is equipped with a 4-core, 8-thread AMD Ryzen V1500B CPU clocked at 2.2 gigahertz, which is pretty solid. Now for something not so solid. This device ships with a single 2 gigabyte stick of DDR4 ECC RAM. 2 gigabytes. I mean, what year is this? That wouldn't really be a huge issue for an entry-level device, but this unit sells for over $1,000. Fortunately, it's really easy to upgrade. Just pop off the top metal housing and add up to 32 gigabytes of RAM yourself. Once in here, you'll see that there's not much to the inside. You see a few fans, RAM slots, the 150 watt power supply, and the PCI expansion slot. More on that in a bit. One thing you don't see though is an NVMe slot, so no NVMe cache drives can be set up with this unit as it ships. Again, not really a problem for an entry-level device, but for $1,000, this is something I'd expect. On the front, you'll see that there are 4 hot swappable drive bays, which can accommodate 2.5 or 3.5 inch SATA drives. The drive slides are sturdy, have a satisfying click when you insert them, and can be individually locked with the included key. That does seem to be a positive theme of this unit. The build quality is really top notch. Moving around to the back of the unit, we do get to... What's this? This video is sponsored by Ekster in their line of high quality RFID blocking slim wallets and accessories. I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I've used the same Amazon wallet for the past couple of years, and while it's fine, these are on a completely different level. These wallets from Ekster are extremely high quality, and while I'm still a broke boy, at least I can look cool now. Their lineup includes a few different options from leather, aluminum, and carbon fiber. My personal favorite though is the Senate in steel blue. It's slim, wrapped in leather, and like all of the other options, has this really cool card ejection mechanism that not only lets you retrieve your cards faster, but is 100% gonna be my new work fidget device. Check out Ekster's line of wallets along with their solar-powered Bluetooth tracking card and other accessories by heading over to shop.ekster.com/RaidOwl and use discount code RaidOwl for up to 35% off your next order. Moving around to the back, we do get access to the I/O, which includes 4 gigabit RJ45 ports, 2 USB 3.2 Gen 1 ports, and an eSATA port. Trying to think if I've ever seen anyone actually use eSATA before. No. And then there is that half-height PCI Gen 3 by 8 slot, which can be used to throw in add-in cards from Synology that include 10 gigabit networking, NVMe cache slots, or both. I like that you have the option to customize this a bit, but you're gonna have to shell out some units for it. All right, I think that's enough about the hardware. They have a wide range of different form factors and sizes, but one thing is consistent: software. So let's talk about that. Now, this is the reason you get a Synology. I know you guys are sweating over your keyboards right now, typing about how you could build a much more powerful true NAS build for half the price. Cool. Plenty of people don't want to do that though. So instead of yelling at me, how about you comment what your favorite zoo animal is and why it's a lemur? Once you plug in your device to your network via one of the network ports on the back, you'll want to find the IP address that the device has been assigned. You can do this one of 2 ways. For those of you that are more tech savvy and know your way around a router, you can just go into your DHCP leases and find it there. Those of you that don't know what the I'm talking about, Synology has an assistant app that you can download that will scan your entire network and display any Synology devices that it finds. Once you have the IP, you'll be able to navigate to it using your favorite web browser. You'll immediately be guided through the setup process that will allow you to name the device, get set up with remote access, and set up your storage pool. After initial software update, this whole process took maybe 5 minutes. I have all 4 bays populated with 4 terabyte drives, so I opted to go with a RAID 5 setup, giving me 1 drive worth of fault tolerance while leaving me with about 10.5 terabytes worth of usable space. Once this is complete, you'll be greeted with the home screen, which does kind of look like an Android tablet OS from about 10 years ago, but it's honestly not that bad. Considering the main functionality of the NAS is the ability to share your storage over the network, let's do that. Simply navigating to the File Station app will prompt you to create your first shared folder, which can also be done in the settings under the file sharing section. This will walk you through the process of naming your share and configuring various settings like enabling the recycling bin or setting storage quotas. Once created, you'll be prompted to set user permissions, which do seem to grant admin users read and write access by default. You can easily change this though if you find out later that other people are poking around in your anime collection. After that, you're free to access your share from any compatible device using the host name or the IP address along with the share name that you specified earlier. It really is that easy, and major props to Synology for focusing on the main functionality of their device and making it a painless setup. In terms of speed, it's going to depend heavily on the drives you choose, your RAID configuration, and your network setup. But for my setup, I was easily able to saturate the 1 gigabit per second connection, writing a large file to my RAID 5 pool. If you do find yourself needing more network speed, then good news. The network ports can be aggregated in multiple different configurations to give you more speed or reliability or both. Okay, so once you have your share set up and fill it with all kinds of memes and cat pictures, you'll probably want to set up some data resiliency. We can accomplish this by using the snapshot feature. Snapshots are essentially copies of your data that are created on set intervals, which allow you to restore your data in the event that you mess something up. Note that this isn't a backup. Snapshots are stored on the same storage pool that you're snapshotting, so in the event that you lose access to your pool, you lose access to those snapshots. I highly recommend setting this up though, as it has saved me in the past from accidental file deletion or modification. To do this, just download the Snapshot Replication app from the package center and create a new snapshot schedule for each data pool that you'd like. You can have it run as frequently as you'd like, but for most people, once a day should be perfectly fine. Note that these snapshots don't just make a hard copy of your data each time. It basically just saves a log of changes made between now and the previous snapshot so that it can restore whatever is needed while saving plenty of storage space. Now, if you want to do a proper backup of your data, you have quite a few options to choose from. Searching for a backup in the package center shows this to be true. You have dedicated apps for Synology's business system, Google Workspace, Microsoft 365, Amazon Glacier, and if you have another Synology device, then you'll want to utilize Synology's Hyper Backup, which allows you to easily back up all your data on your Synology system to another Synology system, all within the Synology ecosystem. Given that the target market for these systems are users that will most likely have multiple devices, then this is probably your best option. There's also a Cloud Sync app that can back up files directly to cloud services like Google Drive, Dropbox, and OneDrive. The last major thing you'll probably want to set up is your remote access. Sure, it's cool having all your anime stored in one place and being able to access it from anywhere in your network, but what about anywhere in the world? Look, I know you don't ever leave your basement, but let's just pretend for a minute, okay? Luckily, in our initial setup, we already configured this with something Synology calls Quick Connect. What essentially is happening is that you're creating a domain name for your device, and Synology is acting as a DNS provider and making sure that when you navigate to a URL, the traffic is routed directly to your NAS. And of course, this is all free and doesn't require any other network configurations. If we navigate to the external access section in the settings menu, then look under the Quick Connect tab, we'll want to make sure that it's enabled. Once enabled, then you'll have your own URL created for you that will let you access your Synology DSM from anywhere in the world. You'll get the same experience as if you were back at home with the ability to access all your files and apps in the same familiar GUI. So in just about 5 minutes, we've set up a RAID pool, configured snapshots, discussed backup solutions, and enabled remote access. That's actually pretty impressive, man. I still use TrueNAS as my main NAS solution, but this is definitely going to find a permanent home in my rack, and it's making it easy to recommend this to users looking for a sophisticated NAS solution without having to deal with sophisticated issues that come with more complex systems. Now at this point, you're free to dive more into the NAS features like different share types, custom permissions, encryption, and all that fun stuff. But I want to cover a lot more stuff that this machine can do, and I don't want this video to be longer than my All right, so aside from being a NAS, this device has plenty of more potential, like hosting media, running Docker containers, acting as a VPN, and even a security system. First off, let's dive into one of the most common features outside of being a NAS, media serving. Of course, all of you out there are law-abiding citizens and have obtained your content 100% legally. I know I have. Now, if you're already storing it on here, wouldn't it make sense to also be able to consume it from here? Duh. In the Synology DSM, there's an app called a Video Station that lets you do just that. If you're familiar with something like Plex or Jellyfin, then it's kind of the same concept. Open the app and point your movie, TV show, or other videos library to the folder on your NAS where you have that media stored, and boom. Video Station will scan that folder and import all the video content. From there, you can easily just play the video directly in the browser. But of course, you don't want to keep all that juicy content to yourself. You'll also be able to cache your content directly to any Chromecast compatible device and enjoy it with the whole family. One thing you'll probably want to set up when adding a movie or TV show library is the video info search feature. This will allow Video Station to automatically scrape the moviedb.com to pull in all kinds of metadata for your content. Unfortunately, this process is kind of annoying. You have to create an account and fill out a form to get an API key that will allow your Synology device to pull in all this data. But once that's done, you don't have to touch it again. So that's good, and of course it's free. I did notice though that if any of your media is encoded via HEVC, then you'll have to download the Advanced Video Plugin app. Why it's not installed by default, I'm not really sure. Maybe it's some kind of licensing thing. Also, when I tried to play HEVC content, the playback wasn't the best. I did notice that the CPU usage was extremely high during this playback, so I'm not sure if this device just struggles with HEVC or if something else is at play here. Otherwise, your content should play back just fine. Now, if you don't want to use Video Station, you can also use the Emby app. Or if you want to be a little beta boy, then there is a Plex app available for you to try. The choice is yours. Don't mess up. Speaking of not messing up, some of you may have chosen the career path of a photographer, and that's okay because Synology's got you. Their aptly named Photos app gives you a centralized location to upload all of your photos and keep them organized into custom albums or based on various metadata or even by person. You can turn this feature off if it creeps you out. It's a pretty neat app that does do a good job of keeping your photos organized and easily accessible. Because remember, we can access everything on our NAS from anywhere in the world. Two features I really like here are the filtering, which gives you plenty of options to filter photos by location, which camera you're using, which lens, which focal length, shutter speed, aperture, ISO, and all kinds of nerdy photographer stuff. Another cool thing is the ability to easily share photos or albums. Simply select what you want to share, click the share icon, and specify the parameters like permissions, password, and the length of time that the share is available for. Once you've set those attributes, then it'll spit out a link that you can easily send to anyone that you'd like to share your works of art with. Now, don't expect this to replace something like Lightroom though, where it's an editing, storage, and organization tool all in one. But if you're looking for something simple and efficient, then it's definitely worth a shot. Okay, let's move on to something a bit more nerdy. At the heart of this device, it's just an ordinary AMD CPU, just like me and you, which means that it has the ability to run virtual machines using their Virtual Machine Manager app, is what I would say if they didn't ship this $1,000 device with 2 gigabytes of RAM. Sure, you can download the app, set it up, import some ISO files, and attempt to run a virtual machine, but unless you're looking to spin up a VM with like 200 megabytes of RAM, then this is pretty worthless. I would have loved to test this feature and could probably do an entire video on it, but with the 2 gigabytes included here, it's just not worth it. Come on, Synology, would another 2 gigabyte stick of RAM really break the bank? Oh well. Luckily, we have a plan B, and we also have another option for virtualization: Docker. Installing the Docker app allows us to easily spin up apps and services in a much more efficient manner than if we were doing so in a virtual machine. The app itself is pretty bare bones, but for someone running Docker on their Synology device, that's to be expected. To create a container, you'll have to search the registry for the image you'd like to use. In our example, I used Heimdall. Once the image is downloaded, you'll be able to select that image when creating a container and walk through the container options like networking, resource limits, and storage binding. The container will then spin up and you'll be able to access it like you would any other Docker container. In this instance, I found the port that was mapped to 443 and navigated to that via my web browser, and voila! Heimdall is up and running in a Docker container hosted on my Synology NAS. Don't lie, that's pretty cool. Okay, now remember how we said you can access this device from anywhere in the world using Quick Connect? Well, that's an awesome feature, but what if you want to access everything in your home network, including other PCs? That's where a VPN comes in. Speaking of VPNs, this video is sponsored by... I'm kidding, for now. Turns out your Synology device can act as a VPN server, giving you full access to your entire network from anywhere. Set this up, you'll go into the VPN Server app. Look, they aren't winning any awards for the creativity with their app names, but honestly, that's a good thing. I like to know exactly what my app is going to do just from the name. Opening the app will greet you with 3 options for setting up a VPN server: PPTP, OpenVPN, and IPsec. I'm going with OpenVPN because that's what I always use. If you use something else, then cool. First thing you'll want to do is click on the VPN server type that you'll want to create. Here you'll have the ability to modify different parameters, but the defaults are probably good for most people. I changed the DHCP range because I wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to interfere with an already existing range on my home network. I then changed the port to 1195 since I do already have a VPN server that is running using the default 1194 port. And then I selected the option to allow clients to access the server's LAN so that all other devices would be accessible. The next step would be to go into your network router and ensure that port forwarding is set up on the port that you specified and is appropriately forwarded to your Synology IP address. If this is done correctly, then your VPN should be up and running. To access it, you'll use the OpenVPN profile that gets downloaded when your VPN was created and import that using the OpenVPN client on your device. Note that you'll first have to make a few changes. Open that file in a text editor and change the server IP text at the top to the IP address of your actual home network. This is your public IP, so ensure that you aren't sharing this with anyone else. You're free to use a hostname if you have that configured as well. The other thing that you'll want to do is add the text "client cert not required" to prevent certificate errors. Save that file, then import it into your client, and you'll be able to connect back to your home network no matter where you are. Pretty neat, huh? Now you don't have to be afraid to ever leave the house, which brings me into my last feature I want to dive into: Synology Surveillance Station. This is an awesome piece of hardware, like actually awesome. Surveillance Station basically lets you connect any IP camera from their list of thousands of supported cameras and go ham on the surveillance. I can do an entire video on this easy, but for the sake of this video, I'll just show you the basic things like connecting a camera, monitoring it, and setting up your recordings and downloading the footage. When you first start it up, it will create a surveillance folder on your main storage pool, which will be the primary location for your recordings. You can change this later if necessary. To add a camera, just click on the IP camera icon, then walk through the initial setup. You will have to ensure that your camera is set up and ready to go in its native app first, so ensure that that's finished. I had to enable ONIVF in the camera's native app. Then once that was turned on, I could connect directly to it via Surveillance Station. You could do this with a single camera or hundreds and monitor multiple sites using the Maps feature. You can set up notifications alerts, you can have it monitor motion activity, set up triggers, and all kinds of stuff. If you have IP cameras set up and you're fed up with your crappy off-brand monitoring app or juggling multiple apps for multiple brands, then this is a no-brainer. Let me know down in the comments if you want a dedicated video on this, because I can't even scratch the surface here. Now, those are all the features that stood out to me as the main ones that people would probably use, but there are plenty more on here. This Synology device can effectively act as a router if you download the DNS and DHCP server apps. I could see the appeal of throwing this device in its own VLAN and putting it behind your main firewall, then throwing a switch downstream from here and connecting all your cameras and whatever devices you don't want connected to your main network. Your Synology device could handle all the DNS requests and assign IP addresses without ever having to configure anything on your main network. Another cool use case would be the reverse proxy app. This would allow you to direct requests coming in to services that you have running on this machine or behind the device itself. One feature that's probably a bit more useful and one that I'm actively using is the DDNS service. The dynamic DNS feature allows you to connect to your DNS provider and constantly update your hostname with your public IP address, so that you won't ever lose external access in the event that your ISP changes your IP address. The last few are a bit more business related, and while I don't use them personally, I know many small business users would love to take advantage of the mail server, LDAP server, OAuth, proxy server, contacts, and chat server. You could almost run your entire business off this single device, and that actually might make a good video. Let me know down in the comments if you want to see me run my hypothetical business off of this device and what the name of my hypothetical business would be. So in conclusion, what do I think of this? Honestly, I really like it. I didn't expect to like it this much, and I'm kind of annoyed that I do, because it just makes me sound like a shill, but it's really awesome. Yes, I did have those two main gripes with the hardware, where they are shipping a $1,000 device with only 2 GB of RAM, and there are no NVMe slots without having to buy an additional add-in card. But features, the user experience more than made up for that. Simple, it's clean, there's very little bloatware or unnecessary options, and things are organized in a way so that it's intuitive enough for someone who's maybe less tech savvy to come in here and get everything done. But it's also not so dumbed down to where a level 5 nerd couldn't come in here and have some fun. As for price, whether or not it's worth it, well, that's entirely subjective. You don't have to buy this specific unit. Their lineup includes devices for as little as a few $100, all the way up to thousands. So if your budget lines up with the hardware that is appropriate for your use cases, then I think you'll be happy with a Synology device. I'll leave links down in the description below to a couple of devices that I'd recommend. That's all I have for this one. If you liked it, then be sure to drop a like. If you like this kind of content, then consider subscribing, or else. I'd like to give a shout out to all of my YouTube members and Patreons. You guys are awesome, and I'm totally not monitoring you with Synology's Surveillance Station, so don't check your closet. But if you're still hanging out, then I appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.